name's Richard Chambers. I used to be a principal of a further education college in London and worked in the world of further education for about 30 years.
My name's Jenkins and I'm a director with a charity called Blenheim CDP, and it's an organisation that works with people with substance misuse problems. It delivers a range of treatment options for people with those sort of difficulties.
My name's Julian Birkinshaw. I'm a Professor of Strategic and International Management at the London Business School.
Ian Dowds, Managing Director of Digital Media at Trinity Mirror.
I'm Tim Stranwick from Westminster City Council. I head up the Transformation and Project Management team here, driving forward all the strategic corporate programmes within Westminster.
My name's Tom Ball and I was with a company called Cognac when Donald was doing the book. Cognac was a visual communication consultancy. We work with large corporates to explain their strategy internally to their staff. So we'd use a large piece of paper to interview the different people around a problem and then very clearly articulate. And now with a new company called Near Desk.
My name's Alex MacDonald and I'm the coordinator of the Ashling project. And we're based in Camden Town in London, and we work with long-term immigrants who wish to return to their homeland sometime and need assistance in doing that. It can become a life-changing experience in many, many ways.
I'm Hugh Tisdale, co-founder of Philosophy Football, self-styled sporting outfitters of intellectual distinction, and we've been in business now for 18 years. First as a mail order t-shirt company and more recently as an internet company. We are publishers, if you like, of t-shirts featuring the words and statements of footballers, philosophers, dissenters and more recently other political characters.
Conventional approaches to management have changed, the business school stuff. I'm a strong supporter of people learning about that, but the issue is about the speed with which change can be achieved. And I think the step forward that Donald Carroll's book makes is to help people think about strategies which will accelerate their ability to innovate and bring new services online.
Big believer in working smart. We spend a lot of time trying to work out how we can be doing things the best way, how to work on the business rather than just in the business. And we spend a lot of time ourselves working at thinking about how to be smart in everything that we're doing.
What I find great about managing value in organisations is Donald's managed to apply his encyclopedic knowledge about transformation and change within organisations, and he really brings out how he's managed to apply that in real life scenarios and real life organisations.
What I found most interesting from the sessions with Donald, something that wouldn't happen if we hadn't had those sessions. We'd have had our heads down doing the normal sort of thing we do most of the time, which is coming up with shirt designs, publishing them, promoting them. But through speaking to Donald, he makes us step back a little bit to examine the company from a different perspective, a higher perspective, if you like. And for me, it felt like I was briefly able to see the wood instead of the trees. I spend most of my time in amongst the trees. Donald gets us to stand back, look to see where we might be going, what we can learn from where we've been, and that's a very refreshing feeling, which I think has done the company a lot of good.
So he's melded the theory that you normally get in management textbooks, but he's applied it in a really practical sense, and you really understand what can work and what can't work in lots of different organisation contexts.
He's had a look at 5 different organisations and looked at them at different stages and applied these management, business and learning models as a way really of managing change and addressing change. And I think it's quite creative, and it also draws on the sort of spectrum of management theory, but takes it a step further and looks at it how you can apply it in a very practical and useful way.
The economy seems to be flatlining rather than plunging. It's not as if all is lost, but at the same time there's a lack of confidence in the country generally, and that affects what people are spending their money on. It's bound to impact on companies, not just us, but other companies.
The economy's in a bad way. We've had 5 or 6 years now, essentially, with no growth in the British economy. And of course, that tells us we've got to start thinking a little bit differently. We've got to try some new ideas. We've got to try new ways of working. And I think there's a lot of enthusiasm and optimism that we can come up with better ways. So I think the timeliness of the book is absolutely correct.
It's fairly obvious that we're in a time of immense change, and the old style business models are pretty much obsolete and of very little use now. This book takes a fresh and refreshing approach to business and learning and business models.
I mean, some of the things Donald tells us are not the things we might necessarily want to hear. But there's no bad thing in that. He can ask us pointed questions that we might be unwilling to ask ourselves. And this is good for us to have to consider the things that he's asking us.
One of the important things that we've got from this was the belief that we needed to become more entrepreneurial, that we needed to develop new ways of progress in the organisation. We needed to look outward, and I think that was one of the terms that Donald used. We needed to look out, face outward from the organisation and look at ourselves critically. What we've done is we've brought new people into the organisation, people with skills that we needed, and people who had that kind of new and aggressive, in some ways, entrepreneurial approach. And our management committee now is quite a solid organisation, and it has a lot of effective members in it.
It was wonderful. One of the big things was realising quite how far we had come, and that all the time we'd spent thinking about how we were doing things was starting to pay dividends. And then to reapply that vigour to some of the areas that we'd kind of stopped paying attention to.
So this is not an academic book, this is a practical book, and Donald uses lots of examples of public sector organisations, private sector organisations, big and small ones, and these are examples of companies trying to move the needle in terms of not just getting higher performance, but also trying to make the workplace a more engaging, exciting place. So it's kind of blending, if you like, good ideas, new theories with practical examples.
I think one of the things we did really well was to be very frank and open internally about where the challenges were. So unapologetic about seeing that there was a problem, something was overrunning, something wasn't being profitable, something wasn't working, and then to spend the time to think about it.
We were a bit too close to it, and a structured view that Donald had could help in many, many ways, and his new approach as well to management and effectiveness and value, and developing that and managing it, and was something that might suit us. And I must say the experience has been very good, and it's made us and forced us actually to think about how we go ahead with the project and to look at new ways of developing.
It didn't feel at all that he'd started with a preconceived notion that he was trying to retrofit other people's quotes on top of. But he really was a journeyman trying to find what was there to be learned. And it was fascinating spending time with him and to see his brain at work.
The examples Donald's used applies across all areas of industry, both private and public sector, but also small organisations, medium-sized organisations and large organisations. And he's shown how his theory can be applied in all of those different scenarios.
All charitable organisations are facing massive problems to do with funding. And this came at a very critical time for us, really, and very, very important for us to start examining where we were going with the organisation and looking forward to how we developed into a quite uncertain future.
The thing about the third sector is it has become increasingly business-like, and if you're not conscious and aware of those sort of business-like or management models, you're going to be left behind. And I think what was good about the book for me was it provided a kind of range of background information, but some really useful models which you could employ in the third sector as well as in the private sector. So from that point of view, I felt it was applicable. It was applicable to a charity as much as it would be to any kind of private sector organisation.
Managing value in organisations isn't the typically arid business tone that you might expect. Donald's style is fairly unique. It's certainly full of energy. It has an approach that that stands out as very different.
What I like about it is entertaining, it is very readable, it's informative, and the way he writes makes it a pleasure to read.
It does it in a very kind of irreverent, humorous and creative way. It says, look, there's no easy answers to these questions. Improving your organisations is a journey, and you've got to try a bunch of different stuff. You've got to try to experiment with new models, new ways of working, and try to figure out what works and what doesn't. And you do that by challenging a lot of the basic orthodoxies or kind of principles that you've traditionally used.
The thing I really liked about it is Donald writes in the way that he is. It's quite witty and it's quite entertaining, so it makes for quite an easy read, as well as being informative.
It's a great read. It attacks all the usual challenges of how do you make big organisations, small organisations more effective? How do you change them, and how do you get out of some of the kind of suffocating problems that many of them have had for the last few years.
What we must do is keep on refreshing the company. Donald's models talk about the need for agility into the future. We've got to make sure we're going in that direction. We don't want to be static, because a static company has no future.
So if you need to transform your organisation and make a real impact with the change you're trying to drive through, then I suggest you dive into Donald's book, because it gives you some really practical advice about how you can drive through change within your organisation.
I think what Donald's done is put a system into place, step-by-step guide in some ways, using us and other organisations and our experience of applying this model.
You can use it. It has practical application. So it's about, it's self-improvement tools that any organisation can take and use in a time of change and the sort of challenges that we're facing at the moment.
It can be used in virtually any enterprise, really, and I think that's its value. And I think value was the word I know that Donald uses an awful lot in the book. It's a valuable asset, I think, to the world of business.
The question is, how quickly can you achieve change? And I think what Donald Carroll's book does is give people insight and a basis for thinking about whether it is possible to actually up the rate of change, because that's essential.